It all began when Natalie Rowe, a transfer student from Boston, arrived at Grieve High School, a small, isolated school buried deep in the northern woods of Maine. The name alone gave her chills. Grieve, grief, as if mourning was built into the bricks of the place. From the very first day, Natalie felt something was wrong. The building was cold, colder than the weather should have allowed. The lights in the east wing flickered constantly, and the teachers avoided eye contact whenever someone mentioned the third hallway. It was listed on the blueprint, but the door was always locked, rusted shut, a sealed metal door with no room number. One morning, during her first week, Natalie walked past the east wing on her way to chemistry class. She wasn't supposed to go that way, but she'd taken a wrong turn. That's when she heard it, a voice, faint, fragile. "Help me." Natalie froze. She turned, but there was no one in the hallway, just lockers, cold concrete, and the distant sound of a dripping pipe. "Help me. He won't let me leave." This time it was clearer. It came from behind the metal door at the end of the hallway. The third hallway. Natalie stepped closer. The door was cold, even through her gloves. When she placed her ear against the metal, a breath of icy wind blew out from under it, and then, a knock from the other side. She ran. That night, she couldn't sleep. Her dreams were filled with dark corridors, rusted gurneys, and the sound of nails dragging along concrete walls. At breakfast the next day, she asked her roommate, June, about the third hallway. June went pale. "Don't talk about that place. People go missing. Just don't." "But why is it there?" Natalie pressed. "And why is it locked?" June lowered her voice. "Because that used to be the mental ward, back when the school was a hospital in the 1940s. They say a girl killed herself in there, slit her wrists with a broken mirror. Her name was Eleanor Grieve, the founder's daughter." Natalie felt a cold shiver down her spine. Natalie couldn't let it go. She spent the next few days in the library, digging through archives and yearbooks. Mrs. Redford, the elderly librarian, watched her with sad eyes, but said nothing. Then, hidden between two books on post-war architecture, Natalie found a small leather-bound diary with the initials E.G. on the cover. It was old. The pages were yellowed, some of them torn or burned at the edges. The first entry read, "They say I'm sick, that the voices aren't real, but I hear them, in the walls, in the floors. At night, they call my name, and I answer back." Natalie flipped through the pages, each one more disturbing than the last. Sketches of bleeding walls, a crude drawing of a metal door, a phrase repeated over and over. "Do not open the third hallway." Then, the final entry. "He comes at night now, not in dreams, but in the light. He waits behind the door. If someone opens it, he will be free. I must become the lock. I must become the silence." Natalie slammed the book shut. The air around her suddenly felt heavy, as if something had just entered the room. She looked up and for a split second, in the library window, she saw her own reflection blink back at her, but with someone else's eyes, not hers, not human. She backed away, heart racing. June found her in the hallway a few minutes later, pale and trembling. "Natalie, what's wrong?" "I found her diary," Natalie whispered. "Eleanor's. She wasn't crazy." June looked horrified. "You need to burn it." "No," Natalie said. "I think she was trying to warn us." Natalie couldn't sleep. Eleanor's diary lay under her pillow, its pages burned into her thoughts. She kept hearing that sentence over and over again. "I must become the lock. I must become the silence." By the next morning, Natalie had made up her mind. During lunch, she convinced June and another friend, Caleb, to help her sneak into the East Wing. At first, they refused, but when Natalie showed them the diary, the drawings, the names, the blood-red ink, they reluctantly agreed. They waited until after dark. The old school building creaked with every step. Shadows seemed to follow them down the hallway. The fluorescent lights flickered as they approached the metal door at the end of the third hallway. It was exactly like the drawing in the diary. Same bolts, same scratches, same blood stain beneath the knob, dry, but unmistakably real. "Are you sure about this?" Caleb whispered, flashlight trembling in his hand. Natalie didn't answer. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a thin, rusted key taped inside the back cover of the diary. She hadn't shown it to anyone. Somehow, she knew. It belonged to the door. With a slow breath, she slid the key into the lock. Click. The metal door groaned open an inch. The sound it made wasn't natural, it was wet, like flesh tearing, not hinges. A gust of air burst out from inside. It was cold and sweet like rotting flowers. The smell of something that had died a long time ago, but never left. Inside, only darkness. Natalie turned on her flashlight. The beam revealed a narrow hallway, tiled like a hospital, with peeling green paint and flickering bulbs dangling from wires. Caleb hesitated. "This place isn't part of the school." Natalie stepped in. The temperature dropped instantly. The hallway was longer than it looked from outside, lined with locked rooms on either side. Numbers on the doors, faded and scratched. Room 301, Room 302, all the way up to Room 313. All the rooms were shut except for one, Room 309. Its door was ajar. From inside came the faint sound of a music box, playing a slow, broken tune. Natalie looked at June and Caleb. Then she pushed the door open. The room was small, dim. The walls were covered in old, yellowed newspapers. Headlines like, "Girl Found Dead in Asylum Wing," "Daughter of Founder Dies in Suicide Pact," "School Denies Existence of Third Hallway." In the center of the room stood a hospital bed, rusted and stained. Beside it sat a little wooden table with a cracked music box, its ballerina still spinning slowly, despite no one touching it. Natalie stepped forward, and the door behind them slammed shut. June screamed, rushing to open it, but it wouldn't budge. Caleb started banging on the wall. "Let us out. Let us out." The music box grew louder, and then, a voice. "Why did you come back?" The ballerina stopped spinning. The room went silent. Natalie turned in, saw a shadow in the far corner, a girl in a hospital gown, hair over her face, pale skin, like paper, blood-stained wrists. Eleanor. June froze. Caleb stepped backward into the wall. Eleanor didn't move. Her voice echoed from all directions. "I locked it for a reason. I locked him away. And now, you brought him back." Suddenly, the room began to shake. The floor cracked, and the newspapers on the wall caught fire, though there was no flame. From the corners of the room, black tendrils began crawling toward them fast, twitching like insects. The air grew thick, choking. June screamed. Natalie dropped the diary. As it hit the floor, the room fell silent again. The tendrils stopped moving. Eleanor stepped forward and looked directly at Natalie. Her face was expressionless, but her eyes were full of something ancient, something broken. "You still have time," she said, "but only if you become the key." "What do you mean?" Natalie whispered, trembling. The shadows surged forward again, and everything went dark. Natalie awoke with a start. The cold sweat on her skin was freezing despite the thick blanket tangled around her. The room was dark except for the dim glow of Eleanor's diary resting on her desk. It seemed to pulse faintly, like a heartbeat. Her mind was a chaotic storm. The words Eleanor spoke, "You still have time, but only if you become the key," replayed over and over. What did it mean to become the key? And why had Eleanor locked him away? The hymn from the diary. The unseen force waiting in the shadows. Natalie knew she had to return to the third hallway, but she feared what awaited inside. During school hours, Natalie tried to act normal, but every shadow stretched longer. Every whisper sounded like a warning. June and Caleb were too scared to talk about what they'd seen. They barely spoke, their eyes constantly darting toward the east wing. That night, Natalie returned alone. The school was silent, empty except for the faint sound of dripping water echoing from the sealed third hallway door. She took a deep breath, then pulled Eleanor's diary from her bag. Flipping it open, she found a new passage that hadn't been there before. To seal the hallway, one must sacrifice the light within. The key becomes the lock, and the lock becomes the soul's prison. Her heart pounded. Did that mean the one who locks the door must be trapped inside forever? Her resolve hardened. Natalie pulled the rusted key from the diary's back cover again and pressed it into the lock. The door creaked open with a groan, releasing a chilling breath. Stepping into the corridor, she felt the cold grip her lungs. The air was thick with whispers, voices crying out in pain and regret. Suddenly, a cold hand grabbed her wrist. She spun around and found June, eyes wide with terror. "You can't do this, Natalie. Once you go in, there's no coming back." But Natalie's mind was made up. "I have to." Together, they walked down the corridor until they reached the spot where Eleanor had vanished. The circle of strange symbols etched into the floor. The symbols glowed faintly under Natalie's feet, pulsing like a heartbeat. June backed away, shaking. "You don't have to do this." Natalie knelt and touched the symbols. The air around her seemed to freeze. The shadows in the hallway twisted and writhed, forming shapes faces of lost students, anguished and pleading. "They're trapped," Natalie whispered. "All of them." Eleanor's voice echoed softly. "The lock must be sealed with sacrifice." Natalie closed her eyes, whispering a silent prayer. She reached into her jacket and placed Eleanor's diary in the center of the circle. The symbols flared bright red, and a gust of wind howled through the hallway. Natalie felt herself being pulled downward, like sinking into water. ... Her limbs grew heavy, and a cold numbness spread through her body. The last thing she heard was Eleanor's voice, faint but clear. "Thank you. You are the silence now." Natalie's vision blurred as darkness swallowed her. The next morning, June woke up alone in her dorm room. Natalie was gone. Her bed was untouched. The diary was nowhere to be found. Panic struck June's chest. She rushed to Caleb's room, but he was gone, too. No sign, no explanation. The school was buzzing with rumors. Teachers spoke in hushed tones about Natalie's disappearance, but no one dared mention the third hallway. June felt the weight of silence suffocating her. That evening, she wandered near the east wing again. The metal door to the third hallway remained firmly shut, but something had changed. The air was colder, thicker, as if the hallway itself was breathing. Suddenly, a faint whisper curled around her ear. "Help me." June spun around. No one. But then she saw a small scrap of paper fluttering beneath the door. She picked it up. It was a page torn from Eleanor's diary, ink smeared and fading. "The lock holds, but the key remains. Watch for the third shadow." Shivers ran down June's spine. As she turned to leave, the lights flickered violently. For a brief moment, the hallway behind the door seemed to stretch endlessly. A black void, with distant, flickering shapes, moving inside. June gasped, stumbling back. The door slammed shut with a deafening clang. She knew then that the horror was far from over. Weeks passed. June tried to act normal, but the nightmare followed her like a second skin. She began to see things out of the corner of her eye, shadows flickering where none should be. At school, her friends whispered about strange noises, objects moving on their own, and unexplained cold spots near the east wing. One night, as she studied in the library, June felt a presence behind her. Turning slowly, she saw a dark figure standing just beyond the rows of bookshelves. The figure was tall, slender, and formless, except for two glowing eyes, burning bright red. June's heart hammered in her chest. "The third shadow," she whispered, recalling Eleanor's last warning. The figure stepped forward. June stumbled back, clutching Eleanor's diary she'd secretly kept hidden. The shadow spoke not with words, but with a voice that echoed inside her mind. "You cannot hide from what you unlocked." June realized with horror. The third hallway was no longer sealed. The darkness had begun to spread beyond its walls, and soon it would reach them all. Natalie closed her eyes and stepped into the circle of symbols on the floor. The room trembled instantly, walls creaked like breaking bones. The air grew heavier, and the voices inside the hallway screamed, but not in anger. They were afraid. Eleanor closed her eyes, then stretched her arms wide. Her form began to crack, like shattered glass. Her shadow fragmented into shards of dim light, floating upward into the ceiling before vanishing. She didn't scream, she only whispered, "Thank you," before fading completely. But Natalie didn't disappear. She was still standing inside the circle. Her body trembled, her feet rooted. The walls pulsed. Then, silence. For a few seconds, Natalie thought she was already dead. Then the symbol beneath her feet began to glow red. The air tightened. Her body felt heavier, as if the ground was pulling her down. Her feet began to sink not into earth, but into liquid shadow, thick like living ink. "What's happening?" Natalie cried out. "I accepted. I agreed to be the key." But Eleanor's voice did not return. Only the voice of the walls answered, in a hiss. This hallway never keeps its promises. The shadows swallowed Natalie up to her knees. She tried to grab onto something walls light, the diary, but everything seemed to move away from her. Then, hands emerged from the floor. Not human, hands long black and ice cold, followed by more hands. Laughter echoed from the walls, of children, old women, men choking, all laughing together. Natalie was being dragged down. Just before her entire body was consumed, she threw Eleanor's diary out of the circle. The book landed beyond the glowing symbols and, suddenly, the red light flickered and died. The shadows stopped moving, the hands pulled back, the laughter turned to screams, and then everything exploded in white light. Natalie vanished, and the third hallway was sealed once more. 3 weeks passed since Natalie disappeared. The school reported that she had run away due to academic stress. The police investigated but found nothing. The door to the third hallway was welded shut, and the area around it was permanently sealed. But not everyone forgot. June and Caleb came back. They were found sleeping inside the old auditorium, without injuries, without memories. They didn't know what happened. They only said it felt like waking up from a very long dream. Teachers were confused, parents overjoyed. But for Mrs. Redford, the old librarian who once gave Natalie access to the school archives, this was no good news. She knew the truth. Someone had paid the price. On the last day of the semester, Mrs. Redford returned to the archive room. The metal cabinet was still there, though its lock was broken. When she opened it, only one item remained: Eleanor's diary, now bound in dark red leather. On the final page was new handwriting, not Eleanor's, but one she recognized instantly. "I did it. The hallway is sealed, but I'm not alone here. Don't let them open it again. Don't let them forget. Natalie Rowe." Mrs. Redford held the diary tightly, then brought it to the basement. There, she bricked it behind a wall, a hidden space once part of the old mental asylum that the school had been built over. Before leaving, she paused and stared down the dark corridor. "I'm sorry, child. May they never find it again." Epilogue. 20 years later, a boy named Aiden was exploring the old school building with some friends. The place had been closed for decades, replaced by a modern facility nearby, but they managed to sneak into the ruins just for fun. In a far corner of the abandoned auditorium, Aiden noticed a crack in the wall, small, but wide enough to see something inside. Curious, he chipped at the loose bricks and pulled out a crimson-bound book. He opened it. On the very first page, it read, "My name is Eleanor Grieve. If you're reading this, it's already too late. They're hungry again." The lights in the auditorium flickered and went out. The third hallway has opened once more.